Welcome to Rambam in Depth. Today we're going to be discussing the Rambam in Hilchos Isurim Mizbeach, Perig Hey, Halacha Yud Aleph, and Halacha Yud Beis. In Halacha Yud Aleph, the Rambam says the following: Mitzvahs asay limleach kol harkabanis, kodim shiyalu lemizbeach. There's a positive commandment in the Torah to salt all the sacrifices before they're brought onto the Mizbeach. Shenemar, because it says, Al kol kabancha takriv melech, and all your sacrifices you shall offer with salt. That's in Halacha Yud Aleph. In Halacha Yud Beis, the Rambam writes, Hikriv b'loy melech klal, if you brought the carbon without any salt, leike, then the person gets lashes. Shenemar b'lei sashbis melech brisali kecha. It says you should not withhold the salt that is the covenant to your God. However, even though you get malchus for withholding the salt, but nevertheless the carbon is still kosher. But the Rambam then distinguishes, and he says a mincha, in a case of a mincha, a flour offering, if you did not put salt on it, then the carbon is not acceptable, is not kosher. So here there's an immediate question that arises. There's a general rule that a negative commandment that does not have an action, you're not punishable. It is not punishable by lashes. Over here, what do? You withheld the salt. You didn't put salt. There's no action over there. So why is there malchus? So the answer must be that when you bring the carbon, the act of bringing the carbon without salt, that is the action. Even though the bringing of the carbon itself is not a sin, but when you do it the wrong way, without the salt, then there's lashes. That's the obvious understanding of this halacha. But Mefarshim, many of the commentaries ask the question, but that contradicts another halacha in the Rambam in Hilchos Chagiga. In Hilchos Chagiga, it talks about the lav, that when you come to the Beis HaMikdash the 3 times a year, the Torah says it's a negative commandment. You shall not show your face empty-handed. You have to bring a carbon. What happens if you don't bring the carbon? You violated this negative commandment. But there is no lashes, the Rambam says. So the question is asked. Many of the Mefarshim ask this question. There seems to be a contradiction over here. When it comes to the salting, even though there's no action, but the fact that you brought the carbon, which is action, without the salt, means that you violated it through an action. Well, in this case as well, the fact that you came into the Beis HaMikdash, you came into the Azara, into the courtyard, and you did not bring a carbon, the act of coming in should constitute an action which is punishable by malchus. So the Rambam seems to be contradicting himself. So many of the Mefarshim, the Mishnas Chachamim, cited by the Minchas Chinuch, the Sfas Emes, the Abnei Nezer, and many others, come up with the same explanation. Their explanation is that when it comes to the lav of Le'yira Panei Reikam, let's say you come to the Beis HaMikdash, you don't bring a carbon, you didn't violate the law because you can still bring the carbon later. In fact, you have Tashlum and Kol Shiva, you have 7 days to make up for not bringing it the first day. So when does it become punishable? When does it become actionable? When are you transgressing? When after the 7 days go by and you didn't bring it, well, that's not an action. The act of coming into the Zara itself, in and of itself, is not a sin. It's not a transgression. The transgression is when 7 days go by and you didn't bring the carbon. So that's inaction. That's Sheva al Taisa. You sat and you didn't do anything. You just didn't bring the carbon. By contrast, when it comes to the salting of the carbon, there you're bringing the carbon, you're doing an action of bringing the carbon without the salt. That action is a forbidden action. You're not allowed to do it that way. That's the standard classic answer to this question. But then there's another question over here. When it comes to a mincha, if you didn't salt it, you violated not only the law of not bringing the carbon with salt, but you also invalidated the carbon. The carbon is not valid. When it comes to any other sacrifices, even though the Rambam makes it clear that you violated the law and you're punishable by malchus, nevertheless, the carbon is still kosher. What's the difference? So there's a very interesting explanation by Rabbi Brisker, the Griz, and he says the following. There seems to be a contradiction in the Rambam himself. The Rambam, when he talks about different ways of enumerating the mitzvahs in the Sefer HaMitzvahs, refers to melicha of a mincha as one of the different things that you do with a mincha, just like you have yitzika and belila, the pouring of the oil and the mixing of the mincha. You also have melicha, you have to salt it. And it shouldn't be counted as a separate mitzvah. And there he critiques the Bahag, who counts these actions as separate mitzvahs. And the Rambam says, no, they're not separate mitzvahs. They're all inclusive in the general category of bringing sacrifices, or bringing a mincha. But then in another place, the Rambam makes it very clear that salting of the karbanos is counted as a separate mitzvah. So the Griz says that there really are two separate issues over here. There's an idea of melicha that's a part of the karban. I mean, just like the karban needs certain types of processes, you need yitzika, belila, it needs melicha also. That shouldn't be counted as a separate mitzvah because that's part of the mitzvah of bringing a mincha. Mincha requires several things, among them salting. It's a chelik, it's a part of the sacrifice itself. By contrast, there's a general halacha by all karbanos that you have to salt them. This is not a chelik of the karban. This is a general halacha. You're supposed to salt karbanos. And if you're supposed to salt karbanos, then it should be counted as a separate mitzvah. It's not a chelik, a part of a specific karban. And that explains the difference between a mincha, in which you didn't salt, and other karbanos. If you didn't salt a mincha, there's something missing in the karban itself. The karban itself is defective. But if you didn't salt any of the other karbanos, since it's just a general din that a karban requires salting, but it doesn't make the karban puzzle just because there's a requirement, and a requirement doesn't necessarily invalidate the fact that you didn't fulfill that requirement. And therefore, the Rambam very understandably distinguishes between all karbanos, that if you didn't salt, the karban is still kosher, even though you violated the law and there is malchus for it. Ein kain the mincha, since you did something that was lacking in the karban itself, not in the law of you have to offer a sacrifice with salting, but the mincha requires the salting. If the requirement was not met, then the mincha is defective, and therefore it's not kosher.